Most people operate under this assumption that the ultimate goal in life is to finally reach a point where everything is just easy.
Right, the dream of the comfortable path.
Exactly. You find the path of least resistance, you avoid heavy friction, you set things on cruise control, and you essentially coast your way into this successful, happy existence.
Which sounds great on paper, but the material we are diving into today fundamentally rejects that entire premise.
It completely flips the script. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are examining a really highly concentrated set of excerpts from a work titled The Architecture of Extraordinary Resilience.
And it is concentrated. It's a short text, but it is dense with some pretty heavy paradigm shifts.
Yeah, and our mission today is to unpack this blueprint. We're going to dissect its 5 core principles to really understand how this framework reframes things like failure, risk, and pain into actionable stepping stones for your own life.
Because if you are listening to this, you are likely someone who wants to build something meaningful. And according to our source material today, that requires a total rewiring of how you perceive hardship.
It requires a profound psychological shift, which is actually evident right from the title. The word architecture implies that resilience isn't just this innate trait you are either born with or you aren't.
Right, it's not a genetic lottery.
Exactly. It's a structure you actively design and build.
And if we look at the introduction of the excerpts, the overarching theme is established immediately with this really striking statement. It says, success isn't built on comfort, it's built on courage.
It sets the tone immediately.
It does. The framework then instructs the reader to dream big, push harder, and never let the fear of failure stop them. But what really stands out to me is that it actively positions failure not as an endpoint or some enemy to be avoided, but as a mandatory training ground.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that idea of failure as a training ground, it directly contradicts our biological wiring.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
I mean, we are biologically and psychologically programmed to seek comfort, right? To run away from things that might cause us to fail or feel inadequate. Why would this framework ask us to actively fight thousands of years of human evolution?
Because the environment we evolved in is not the environment we are currently trying to succeed in.
That makes sense.
Evolutionarily, seeking comfort meant finding shelter, avoiding predators, kept you alive. But in a modern context, constantly seeking that psychological comfort zone, it just leads to stagnation.
Right. You're not running from a tiger anymore. You're just avoiding a difficult email or a tough project.
Exactly. And the author challenges us to rethink those deeply ingrained human instincts by suggesting that every setback is actually a lesson that sharpens your capacity and prepares you for something greater.
It reminds me a lot of physical training.
How so?
Well, think about tearing a muscle at the gym. If you want to build physical strength, you literally have to go into the gym and lift heavy weights until your muscle fibers sustain micro tears.
You're actively injuring the muscle in a controlled way.
Right. You're failing the muscle. It hurts, and the next day you have that delayed onset muscle soreness. Your body is telling you, wow, that was painful. Let's not do that again.
But that biological feedback is deceptive.
Completely deceptive. Because in the recovery phase, that muscle repairs itself denser and stronger, specifically to handle that exact load the next time. The failure of the muscle was the literal training ground for the growth.
That is a perfect analogy. And it aligns exactly with how a structural engineer might stress test a new building material. You don't test its strength by leaving it alone in a temperature-controlled room.
Right. You have to break it.
You apply massive amounts of pressure until it cracks, specifically to find out where the structural weaknesses are.
Which brings us to the first of the 5 principles in this blueprint. Pillar 1 is fail forward. And there is a very specific phrase used here that feels central to the whole philosophy. It says, every mistake is proof you're trying.
That phrasing is crucial because society so often views mistakes as definitive endpoints.
Yeah, you made an error, therefore the endeavor is over.
Or you simply aren't capable enough. But this perspective flips that logic entirely. It argues that mistakes are active evidence of momentum. They are data points.
Just data.
Exactly. The material explicitly tells you to learn from it, grow from it, and keep moving forward stronger than before. It frames the mistake not as a red light, but as a directional sign, pointing out where you need to adjust your approach.
I hear that, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Isn't there a danger in kind of romanticizing failure? I mean, at some point, a mistake is just a mistake, right? If you keep making the same error over and over, that's not proof you are trying. That's just poor execution.
Right. It's just bad planning at that point.
Yeah. So how does the blueprint differentiate between productive failure and just being sloppy or careless?
That is a very critical distinction to make. The framework isn't advocating for sloppiness or celebrating failure for the sake of failure when it says every mistake is proof you're trying. The unwritten second half of that equation is that you are trying something new.
Oh.
You're pushing the boundaries of your current capabilities. Productive failure happens at the frontier of your competence. If you are making the exact same mistake repeatedly, you aren't failing forward. You are just failing in a loop.
Failing in a loop. I like that.
The forward part of the equation requires the active integration of the lesson. You have to extract the data from the failure and actually use it to build a more structurally sound approach for your next attempt.
So it's about being an active participant in the autopsy of your own mistakes.
Yes, perfectly said.
And pushing to that frontier of your competence naturally requires you to step out of safety, which bridges us right into the next section. I want to group the second and third points together because there's this really fascinating tension between them.
The risk and the work.
Exactly. So pillar 2 is take bold risks. The quote here is, "Great lives are never built inside comfort zones. If you want extraordinary results, you must be willing to take extraordinary risks."
The psychology behind the comfort zone is fascinating because it has highly deceptive.
It feels safe.
It feels like a safe harbor, but over time, it actually becomes a cage that shrinks your potential. Taking a bold risk is the mechanism you use to break out of that cage.
But let's be honest, taking an extraordinary risk can also sound incredibly glamorous.
Oh, it's highly romanticized.
Right. It conjures up this cinematic movie montage image of pushing all your chips to the center of the table, or quitting your job in a blaze of glory handing in your badge, or moving across the country on a total whim. There's a massive adrenaline rush, a huge dopamine hit that comes with making a huge, bold decision.
And that dopamine hit is exactly what can lead people astray, which is why the author doesn't let the reader linger in the romance of risk-taking for very long.
Not at all.
The thrill of the leap is only a tiny fraction of the process. And this is where the framework introduces a necessary and frankly sobering counterweight with the third pillar, which is commit to hard work.
Right, because the movie montage usually completely skips over the Tuesday morning after you took that massive risk.
Yes, the silent Tuesday morning.
When the adrenaline is completely gone, no one is clapping for you anymore, and you actually just have to sit down and do the work. The excerpts state plainly, success doesn't happen overnight. It explains that success is built through discipline, long hours, and the determination to keep going when others quit.
This tension between Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 is where the true architecture of resilience is actually formed. Taking a bold risk isn't a single one-time leap off a cliff.
The leap is the easy part.
Exactly. The true risk is committing to the grueling, profoundly unglamorous follow-through of daily discipline. It is the willingness to endure those long hours that the text mentions.
I want to focus on that specific phrase, when others quit. It implies that quitting is the default setting. It's the expected outcome when the friction gets too high.
It is the expected outcome because sustaining discipline without an immediate reward goes entirely against our modern conditioning.
We want the quick fix.
We live in an environment where we expect a rapid correlation between effort and outcome. You press a button on your phone, food arrives. You post a picture, you get immediate validation.
Instant gratification.
But the long hours mentioned in the source material represent an environment of delayed gratification. When you are pouring effort into a project or a new business or learning a skill and the results just aren't showing up yet, the psychological friction becomes immense.
It's excruciating.
And most people quit because they interpret that lack of immediate results as a sign of failure, rather than recognizing it as the necessary gestation period for success.
So how do you survive that gestation period? I mean, if the adrenaline of the initial bold risk completely fades and the daily grind is inherently boring and difficult, what sustains the structure, you can't just white-knuckle your way through years of delayed gratification.
You really can't. Your willpower will eventually just deplete, which is why the architecture relies on the fourth pillar to act as the foundation, and that is stay grounded with faith and purpose. The instruction here is to believe in something bigger than yourself.
Which introduces a really interesting pivot in the tone of the material.
It does.
Usually when you read these kinds of blueprints about ambition and taking risks and outworking the competition, it leans heavily into ego. It's all about personal domination, accumulating massive wealth, or proving your doubters wrong.
The chip on the shoulder mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
But this pillar completely changes the flavor of the framework.
What's fascinating here is that it serves as a structural load distributor.
A load distributor. Break that down for me.
Well, if you rely solely on your own ego, your desire for personal status, or your anger at your detractors to fuel you, you will eventually experience ego depletion. The long hours and the inevitable repeated failures we talked about will eventually wear down that selfish motivation.
It's a dirty fuel source. It burns hot, but it runs out fast.
Exactly. And the text explicitly links towering ambition with deep humility. It states, stay humble, stay grateful, and use your success to uplift the people around you.
So connecting your ambition to the upliftment of others isn't just a nice moral thing to do. It is actually a functional strategy for endurance.
Precisely. When your purpose extends beyond your own personal comfort, your capacity for resilience expands exponentially. If you are only working for yourself, it's very easy to convince yourself to quit when things get hard.
Because you only have to negotiate with your own comfort level. You can just say, I don't really need this that badly.
Right. But if your success is structurally tied to the well-being or the advancement of your family, your community, or a cause you deeply believe in, the cost of quitting becomes much, much higher.
You can't just walk away.
You are building a wider foundation to support the immense weight of the risks and the hard work. True resilience, as outlined here, is fundamentally a community-building tool.
That reframes the entire concept of ambition for me. You aren't just building armor for yourself. You are building a shelter for others.
A shelter for others. I love that.
And you are going to need a really robust shelter because the author doesn't sugarcoat the reality of the environment. Which brings us to the fifth and final principle. Turn pain into power.
This might be the heaviest concept in the entire collection of excerpts.
Yeah, it doesn't hold back.
The material doesn't say life might challenge you or that you might encounter some mild friction on your journey. It states it as an absolute unavoidable guarantee. It says life will challenge you.
But then it offers this directive. Instead of breaking your house, you let those challenges shape you into someone stronger and wiser.
And that requires an incredibly high level of self-awareness.
It really does, because when you are in the middle of a painful setback, it feels like it is breaking you. It feels entirely destructive.
It does feel destructive, which is why the language used here is so critical. Let those challenges shape you. The word let implies agency. It implies a choice.
I'd actually push that a step further, because let almost sounds passive.
How so?
Like you just sit there and allow the pain to wash over you. But in the context of architecture and resilience, it demands an active surrender to the process of growth.
Ah, I see what you mean. That is a very accurate reading. It is not about passive victimhood. It is about cognitive reappraisal.
Cognitive reappraisal.
Yes. When those guaranteed challenges arrive, do you adopt the mindset of a victim and perceive the pain as a meaningless attack on your well-being? Or do you adopt the mindset of an active participant in your own development, taking the raw, chaotic energy of adversity and actively transmuting it into wisdom?
It makes me think of forging steel.
That's a great visual.
You take a raw piece of metal and you subject it to extreme, frankly, violent heat, and then you strike it repeatedly with a heavy hammer. If the steel had consciousness, it would probably feel like it was being destroyed.
It's a traumatic process for the material.
Right. But the blacksmith isn't trying to break the steel. The blacksmith is using the heat and the impact to align the molecular structure and shape it into a blade that is far stronger and more useful than the raw metal ever was.
And if we return to the engineering metaphor, the stress test is going to happen whether you want it to or not. The life challenge will apply the pressure. The choice you have is whether you let that pressure snap you in half or whether you observe where the stress fractures are occurring and use that information to reinforce your structure.
It's the difference between a glass window and a muscle like we talked about earlier. When you apply extreme pressure to glass, it just breaks and it's ruined. But when biological systems or well-designed structures face targeted stress, they adapt. The framework is asking you to treat your character and your ambition as an adaptable system, not a fragile pane of glass.
And that adaptability is what ultimately dictates long-term success. The text brings all of these pillars, the productive failure, the bold risks, the grueling discipline, the community-focused purpose, and the transmutation of pain into one final, really potent synthesis.
Yes, it presents what it